Welcome to Childcare Rockstar Radio. I am your host, Chris Murray. Childcare leaders around the globe are breaking through challenges, leading the way in innovation, testing new best practices, and impacting children and families in a much more powerful and positive way than ever before. Each week, join me for interviews with early childhood leaders and experts that will leave you inspired to become the next childcare rockstar. Now, let's go. This is Childcare Rockstar Radio, episode 150, featuring Sue Kurtovich. I'm thrilled that you're back with me. I am Chris Murray, your host here at the podcast, and I am excited to share with you a very special human in the world of early learning. And she's not from the States. She's from New Zealand, Miss Sue Kurtovich. She is an industry veteran with, I don't remember, she shared with us how many years she has, 3 or 4 decades, certainly, in early learning. And I am so blessed to know her and to call her a colleague and soon to be friend as we do travel to New Zealand in July of this year. My team and I are heading down to the Down Under area, although I know that New Zealand might not refer to themselves as Down Under. That might be an Aussie term, but very, very excited to be the keynote speaker at the Early Childhood Council annual conference in Wellington, New Zealand at the end of July. So if you are listening to this from Australia, I would love to invite you to hop a plane over. And if you're an easy flight to New Zealand, depending on where you live, I would love for you to come over. And the invitation has been extended by the ECC folks because they're like, don't forget to invite our friends from Australia. So if you guys want to learn more, we will get you the link in the show notes to get registered for the conference and come be with me and come see me speak. And I'm also doing a smaller workshop, and we have a booth, and I'll be walking around signing books and giving hugs, and I can't wait. So today's topic is a little bit of a more difficult topic that we are facing right now in our world, and that is a global teacher shortage. So we get the perspective from Sue, who is a prior owner of multiple locations or sites in New Zealand, and now she's a consultant helping owners and leaders every day and teachers in the field. And she tells the story of a severe labor crunch in New Zealand due to the pandemic. And even prior to the pandemic, it was getting pretty rough. And so we're going to dive into that topic. And we're going to also just learn more about the culture of early childhood education in New Zealand. It's a very, very cool episode. So stay tuned for everything that we're going to discuss on today's podcast. This podcast is sponsored in part by Child Pilot. If you're struggling to find the right solution to manage your childcare program, check out our friends at Child Pilot to learn more about their all-in-one childcare management platform and first-class customer support. With over 20 years of experience in the software industry and a team of professionals with early childhood education backgrounds, Child Pilot guarantees to help you manage your center efficiently and strengthen parent connections. Set up a quick 5-minute discovery call with them at 940-287-3704 or visit them online at childpilot.com, and you can mention Chris Murray or Rockstar Radio and get 2 months free. And again, that phone number is 940-287-3704 or childpilot.com. And tell them Chris Murray sent you and get 2 months free. All right. I want to just tell you a little bit about what's going on here. We have so much going on here in early May is when I'm recording this intro, and so much good stuff I can't even fathom to share with you with the time that we have. Just know that we are creating new content. We've hired content creators. We have new empowered educator teacher training that we really recently launched. So we're helping teachers as well. We're expanding our director and our admin training programs. We've hired new director coaches. We are working on new book ideas and authorship, and so much more. so much more. We recently announced that Damon John is going to be our celebrity keynote speaker. Damon John from Shark Tank, the People's Shark. And we're going to be together in Orlando at the Child Care Success Summit 2024. I think it's the 12th annual summit. If I got that right. And it's October 12th to the 14th that we kick off on the night of the 11th. So we're going to do a really fun reception party with a ribbon cutting ceremony. And I think we're also going to do a first timer welcome reception that night for the first time. We've never done a first time welcome reception, but I want to welcome everybody with open arms and big hugs and make you guys feel really welcomed to our community and our tribe. So if you are a first timer, if you have never been to the Child Care Success Summit, this message is for you, which is that it's time. It's time to come and join us and see what the hubbub is all about. It is it's the largest event, an incredible event. And of course, I'm the host, and it's my baby, it's my birth child, right? So I created the vision for it, and it grew and grew and grew. And now we're expecting about 1,400 owners and leaders. We have a expanded owner track. We have a multi-site owners track. We have more advanced business topics coming in for how to grow and scale and manage your multi-site operation and how to financially make it work for you, and then how to exit your business at the top of your game or how to leave a legacy. So all of those topics will be covered in depth, and all the stuff is going to be business or leadership focused. So we've done a little bit of mindset in the past with Lisa Nichols and some of our other mindset trainers, and we've done some other topics that haven't been completely in business and leadership. We did some fitness topics. We've done some other things and just gotten creative with it. But we're going to go back to really focusing on the business best practices, and pure business and leadership content. So you're going to love it. And if you're a first timer, this is my special invitation to you. So go to childcaresuccesssummit.com. Our BOGO, buy one, get one offer is still in effect, but not for very long. I think it ends at the end of May. You'll find out when you go there, and you can look at all the information, but I just don't want you to miss out on the BOGO, because if you want to bring a friend, a spouse, a partner, a director, you can still get in for super cheap if you do it on the per person price on the BOGO ticket. So take advantage of that at childcaresuccesssummit.com. And let's dive in with Sue Kurtovich. So we're going to hear the story of New Zealand childcare from one woman's perspective, a very knowledgeable woman that has consulted hundreds of programs in New Zealand. And Sue also has been to our summit. So she has come across the pond and attended our summits back in 2013, 14, and 15, which is super cool. So I didn't remember meeting her back in the day, but we may have met briefly. I think if I met her, I would remember, but I'm very much looking forward to meeting her in person in New Zealand when I do my keynote talk and hanging out with all the peeps in New Zealand. So enjoy this episode. And before we hit the go button, I want to tell you one more announcement, which is that this episode is also sponsored in part by the Child Care Success Academy. And if you're a fan of this show, this podcast, you know the powerful transformations from the people that we've had, the guests that we've had, the ECE business owners and leaders on this podcast. You hear them every week, every other week. You hear them come out with people talking about what they've gained from being in the academy and powerful things that leadership teams can achieve together inside the academy with our help. It's the world's first, best, and largest coaching organization exclusively for childcare. The academy is currently accepting applications, and a childcare business coach is standing by right now. So take that first baby step by booking your free call today at childcaresuccess.com/apply. childcaresuccess.com/apply. It will take you through a brief application process. There is no obligation to join from filling out the application, and it's all free. And we'd love to have a chat with you to find out which level of membership is right for you. You've heard all the success stories. You've heard the transformations on this podcast. And I would love for you to be my next guest, my next transformation. So what are you waiting for? All right. Enjoy Sue Kurtovich. Let's learn. Let's go. Welcome back to the podcast, Childcare Rockstar Radio. I'm so thrilled to have you here today, and I cannot wait for you to meet someone very special in our world in the ECE industry. She is from the amazing country of New Zealand, Miss Sue Kurtovich. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Chris.
I'm so thrilled that you're here, Sue. I'm assuming you are sitting somewhere in New Zealand right now. Where are you?
I am indeed. So I'm in the boardroom of the Early Childhood Council offices in Wellington, just by absolute chance, because yesterday I was in the South Island, then I caught a ferry over and now back in the North Island on our way home back to Tauranga, where I normally live. So it just all coincided rather well that I was somewhere right in the middle of everything.
And coincidentally, also, that is where I am headed in just a few months' time to hang out with the folks such as yourself at Early Childhood Council to do a big conference and to be the keynote speaker at your July conference. And I'm so excited.
We are so excited.
Yeah.
We're absolutely buzzing at the prospect, and just so thrilled that someone who has a calendar like yours has managed to fit in the rather long flight to get here. And I know that we'd love to keep you for longer, but I appreciate that you've got lots of commitment. So thank you, for coming so far.
Absolutely. And I'm also bringing books for all the audience members, and I'm bringing folks to work a little bit of a booth so people can learn more about what we do in the exhibit area. So I'm excited to bring in some colleagues and some resources, and I just can't wait. I'm over the moon excited about it. So
fantastic.
Awesome. So let's focus on you. Tell us more about the world of Sue and the world of your journey in early learning, early education. How long have you been in the industry? And tell us more about your journey.
Right. Well, it starts quite a long time ago, back in the 1980s. I was a public servant back in those days, so we're working in the state sector in a completely unrelated field. And the opportunity came up for feasibility studies to be done for setting up early childhood services. In the day, they were calling them creches, to set up what they were described as a public service creche, so that the parents who were working in the public service would have somewhere to take their children. And I got involved in that feasibility study. Roll on a few more years, I had, by this stage, left work, had two little preschoolers of my own, and met up with someone who had gone ahead and established this so-called creche, and they were having all sorts of problems with administration and so forth, because it was run by committee, the sorts of places. And they said, would you come back and do the admin for us, Sue? And I was sort of at that point, the children were just at that age where I thought, I wouldn't mind a few hours work. So off I went to sort out the admin. And that really was where it started. I got together with a friend who also had two little children, and we decided, why don't we build a preschool? And back in those days in New Zealand, preschools were sort of something that you were sort of seeing, well, that's kind of not a real business, not really a business.
Yep.
There we were. We had 4 children between us, and there were 20 months in difference from the youngest of those 4 to the eldest. So there we were, 2 double pushchairs, if you could imagine. 2 children in each, going around to the banking sector, which was full of all these crusty old men at the time, and who sort of pretty well laughed at us. And we thought, well, we're not going to give up on this. We're fairly tenacious sort of women, and we were determined to get a preschool going for our children. So we thought, we can't be the only people that are looking for a preschool, a nice preschool, as we call it. And we found a builder who was prepared to take a punt on us. And he said, look, I'll build you a building. I'm going to put it on poles so that if you girls don't pay me back, that's how he spoke to us, if you girls don't pay us back, we'll take this building and we'll just relocate it. Okay, we said, we promise we'll pay you back. And we did. And then we went on and built 2 more preschools. And that was sort of our entry into things. So I kind of ran the business side of things. My colleague, she was sort of more in the education side of things, but I was always really interested in the business side and the staffing and all of those. Regulation and compliance was kind of my thing. So I then got involved with the Early Childhood Council on a voluntary basis. So it was very much a voluntary organisation, really just a membership-based organisation of all of these centres that needed support, and they got support from each other. And during that time, somehow I ended up the president, don't ask me how, and then the organisation grew, and then we needed, well, we would have some paid staff. Let's have a CEO. Well, let's take our president and turn her into a paid CEO. So that's where that work came from. And so for over a decade, I led the organisation through some reasonably major regulatory changes and those kinds of things. And then at the end of that period, I took a little break. I went over to live in the Philippines for a couple of years because I'm always one to take an opportunity when it comes up. And then when I came back, I thought, what should I do now? I'll be a consultant, and that's what I am these days. So I can consult to those services that need help, usually. And I also do run seminars and do in-house training on regulation, compliance, staffing, those types of areas, not the teaching and learning side. I leave that to everybody else, but I concentrate on those areas. I remain very much a supporter of the Early Childhood Council. I am a life member and I am a patron, so I currently sit on the board, hence why they let me use their boardroom.
Well, that is fantastic. And we are doing similar work. So you saw, I don't even know how you found me to start, but I'd love to know that. But we're doing similar consulting type training, coaching on the business side of childcare. You're doing it in New Zealand. I'm doing it here in the States. But how did you find me? Just curious.
Well, that's interesting because I'm not sure I can maybe you came up, dare I say it, as a feed on Facebook or something as
sure
as that, because it's difficult to find professional development opportunities in a country like New Zealand when you've been around for quite a long time, and I have been around for quite a long time.
Yeah,
but I'm very much the kind of person which, I think I don't know it all. There's more out there, and I want to know more. And so I think it was probably something as simple as Facebook. Clicked through, saw that you were having a conference, and I think it was the Atlanta one from memory. Came over all on my own to Atlanta, came to the conference, then came back and saw you again in Chicago. Absolutely wonderful events, and came back so inspired because I was probably at that stage where you're getting into your senior years and you need a little bit of a shot in the arm to go, I need to keep fresh and enthusiastic about what I do. And you absolutely gave me that. Oh, and I came to Los Angeles as well. And I do remember that one very much because the fire alarm kept going.
Oh, right. No, Vegas.
Yeah,
Vegas.
Yes, that's right, Vegas. And you were so unflustered by it all, and we just absolutely loved that. So, yeah.
Good. Yeah, that was a great one. We had Dennis Vickers speak at that one, and he's a wonderful veteran of early childhood in the States. He has written, he used to have a column in the Exchange magazine.
Yeah, I was just staggered by the speakers that you had.
Yeah.
And the bonus was that Psychedelic Furs was playing next door to the hotel, so we got to go and see them as well.
Nice. Awesome. How fun. Look at you, Sue. That's fantastic. I love that. So 2013 was Atlanta. So we've known each other a decade, which is pretty cool. Pretty cool. It only took me 10 years I had to develop this podcast and then get you on the podcast. So this is great. I'm celebrating that right now. Tell me more about your home life. And I don't know if it was on our thing, but I want to ask you about a fun fact. So something that not a lot of people know about you that you could share with the listeners and the audience. And you mentioned that before we started the recording, you mentioned your RV. So your home life might include some RVing around the country, but share with us more about what life is like at home.
Okay, well, at home we live in the beautiful Bay of Plenty, so in a city called Tauranga. So we retired down there, or we call it semi-retirement. And so my partner, he had a plumbing business up in Auckland, so our biggest city in New Zealand. And then when he got to retirement age, he said, let's go somewhere where there's a beautiful view and it's nice and warm. And so off we went looking for a house in Tauranga. So that was about 6 years ago. And we kind of laugh about the semi-retirement because he's the retired bit and I'm still the working bit, but that's the way I love it. So prior to that, I used to fly around all over the country and stay in hotels. And Chris, I'm sure you know exactly what that can be like. It looks far more glamorous than it really is.
Yes.
And so when my Tom retired, we got this wonderful idea that why don't we take the motorhome, or as you'd say, the RV, and Tom will drive me around the country to my work instead. And New Zealand's a relatively small place, but the roads aren't as great as they are in the US. So we tootle around the countryside and I get to visit so many wonderful early childhood services in places that you would not normally visit because we're on the road. So we go to little places that would get left off the map otherwise.
Yeah.
That's given me a real perspective of our sector in New Zealand that I wouldn't otherwise see. If you fly into main cities only and you only talk to people in main cities, then that's what you know and that's what you see. But there's all these people in little rural areas in small provincial towns doing marvelous stuff. And that's been a real pleasure of taking a slightly slower approach to getting around the country, and the addition of the fact that I get to travel with Tom and we could get to bring our little dog. And I know you've got a dog, Chris. Well, we've got a 15-year-old nearly now, Jack Russell.
Okay.
He travels everywhere with us in New Zealand, and he's just developed, or in the last few months, he's got doggy dementia, and it's got a special name, but we just call it doggy dementia.
Yeah.
Where he stares at walls and he forgets things, and he steps in his water bowl and does all sorts of mad things.
Right.
But we absolutely love him to bits. So that's kind of my life. When I'm at home, I spend a lot of time with my grandchildren. We've got 3 grandchildren who are 4, 3, and 2, and we've got another one due in 8 days' time. So that's very exciting.
That is very exciting. Congratulations on baby number 4 here shortly. And that is so exciting. Tell me more about the world of ECE in New Zealand, because you mentioned going around the countryside to these little rural places and seeing small settings. And so I'd love to know more about, you've been to the States, you might have attended preschools and gone to childcare centers here. What are some of the biggest differences that you can describe in the culture of early childhood in New Zealand versus the US?
Look, I think there's probably a lot of similarities. We have large chains of centres, but obviously we're a small country, so we only have a few large chains. We have lots of single centre owner operated, where the vast majority are owned by someone who has a teaching qualification. So it is a teacher who has purchased a service and is teaching on the floor in their own service.
Yes.
They've gone from being a teacher in someone else's centre to I own my own centre.
Yeah.
The average size of services in New Zealand is probably reasonably small. So we would have probably somewhere in the sort of the 40 to 45 licensed places would be sort of average size. In saying that, we've got quite a few that are in the sort of 25 children. So these are little boutique kind of services with the teacher working on the floor, but also then having to do everything else as well as what the corporates would do, which is to understand all the regulation, deal with all the staffing things, the marketing, the everything else.
Yeah.
So we kind of have that whole range. When we're out in the provinces, we might more likely to see more of those smaller owner-operated services. And then we've got quite a substantial part of the sector that is owned by what we call community groups. So these are incorporated societies where a bunch of parents are running the centre or governing the centre as a committee, and then there is a manager who runs it. Now, those ones are an interesting concept as well, because the parent committee tends to change as the children move through the service, and then another lot of parents come on. And so being a manager in a service like that's quite an interesting one. So we've got these quite diverse centres, but lots of small standalone services. And I'm not sure whether that's how common that is
Right.
in the US.
I think that you have in the US you have centers that usually have a minimum of 45 or 50 children and up. And then you have the home-based. And then if they're going to be smaller, mostly they're operating out of a home or a group home, which is, again, between 8 and 24 children. So similar, but different. So that's cool to understand.
We do have a home-based sector as well, but we certainly have, a proliferation of the smaller services. And they are the ones I probably worry the most for, because as the challenges have got greater in the sector, and they certainly are greater now than I've ever seen them. I worry about burnout for those people who own the business, work in the business, and the pressures on them.
Yes. So let's talk about the challenges, the top issues that are facing childcare providers in New Zealand. And you say that you've never seen them be so challenged. So is that because of coming out of COVID, or talk more about that, if you will?
I think COVID's had a big impact across New Zealand. We really cut ourselves off from the world, rightly or wrongly, and there's plenty of people who will have an opinion either way. But what the downside for the early childhood sector was that we probably didn't have a true understanding of our reliance on immigration when it came to our teaching workforce. So we have quite a highly qualified teaching workforce in New Zealand. So there's fairly high expectations around having fully qualified teachers working in early childhood centres, and there are incentives for them, funding incentives for having more qualified teachers, and they are right across the board nationally. And the tight immigration, were basically shutting our borders and not allowing anyone in, had such a huge impact on our workforce. We don't have sufficient domestic students being trained, and we had this big reliance on people coming in from overseas. That, it takes a little while to really feel the huge impact of that, and then unwind that and to build back up again at the same time that probably many countries are suffering teacher shortages. Our closest neighbour, Australia, we're driving along in our motorhome and we're down in the South Island. I hear an advertisement come on the radio from the Victorian government, which is a state in Australia, and they're advertising for New Zealand early childhood teachers to go over to Australia to fill their shortage, and they are providing all these relocation incentives and of course, their pay is higher over there, and it's really hard to keep our young people when we do get them trained. So this is our biggest challenge. It's been 35 years, and we've had staffing shortages over the years, but I've not seen one as extreme as this, and without sort of a light at the end of the tunnel. So that's kind of wearing people down a little, and probably wearing out some of the good teachers we've got. So we're very mindful of what we need to put in place to keep the good teachers that we've got, and to ensure we look after them.
Right. And so what about opening the borders back up and letting in more programs bringing in more immigration, more other...
That's happening now. But of course, we're competing now with other countries that are doing the same thing. So New Zealand has some wonderful advantages. It's a beautiful country and, all of those things. But there's, people make all sorts of choices around where they want to live, and we just need to crank that up quite a lot more. Our regulatory framework in New Zealand is not all that kind at times around trying to the process. It's lengthy. things are slow. So getting qualifications assessed as being comparable, these things can take months.
Right.
It's not a quick process. We will get there again. And it is, it's work in progress. There's an entire department at the Ministry of Education here called Teacher Supply. I'm not sure what we're doing at the moment, but, we hope something.
Right. So is the Early Childhood Council working in advocacy efforts to try to make change for
Absolutely, and tirelessly, and it's these are the things that we work on. So there's a few areas. So around teacher supply, which is a big one, around ensuring that the funding that early childhood services receive is sufficient to pay our teachers what they're worth, without putting too much of an additional burden on families, because their cost of living has gone up in New Zealand, and there's going to be a sort of a pinch point somewhere where parents start opting out of early childhood if we can't keep it affordable in relation to the wages. So, that constant advocacy around ensuring that the government portion that is paid to services is sufficient to meet that, and that making sure that those who are most in need are provided with those top-ups. So there's been a recent improvement in the subsidies that are additionally available to families who are from who have greater needs.
Right.
Those things as well. So there's always lots of advocacy in early childhood to keep it up first and foremost.
Yes, absolutely.
Front of mind of the officials.
Right. So in terms of issues other than the teacher supply, well, let me ask you this. So in the US during COVID, we lost about a third to a half of all small businesses. And I think that number applies roughly to the field of early childhood businesses as well. So about 25 to 30% closed their doors completely during COVID. And so we have more, we call them childcare deserts. In other words, there's places in the States where there's either very little or no childcare at all, mostly more rural. And it's called a, childcare desert, where we've recognized that there's way more need than supply. And so does that type of thing exist in New Zealand so I guess the question is, how fully enrolled are the programs that survived? Are they all just full and bursting to the seams with kids because there's way more demand from parents than there is supply at this point? Or is it kind of a mixed bag across the country?
It's a mixed bag, Chris.
Okay.
Depends where you are. So there will be pockets of oversupply, but there would also be areas of undersupply. And I think probably right, some of those rural areas, those the little provincial towns, that might be where it's more difficult. I know places for under two, so for our youngest children, are harder to get, because we need more staff for those services. So being able to staff those services. We've had centres that aren't able to operate at capacity simply because they can't get the teachers to meet the regulatory requirements. So the places might be there. But yeah,
Right.
I'd say it's pretty much a mixed bag, and it depends where you are. There were quite and possibly the same in the US. Parents' work patterns started to change. So interestingly, parents working from home one day a week after COVID came, we all came right and we all went back to work.
Yes.
That model of working from home one day a week, I hear lots of services say, oh, we can't fill Fridays. We can't fill Fridays because all the parents are home on a Friday now. So the work patterns have changed. So that's had a wee bit of an impact on occupancy as well. But very, very variable, I would say, would be the answer there.
Mm-hmm. So when you were running your schools, and sounds like you had 3 locations, what were some of the challenges? Did you face similar challenges in terms of teacher staffing, or what were, can you remember a really particularly challenging part of your journey?
I think the teaching situation was not something that comes to mind at that time. I think the years that I had the services would probably be the halcyon days, almost. They were pretty good. There was a
Yeah.
lot of there was a big increase in the number of services over those years. So needing to be a standout service that was providing something that was a special and what parents wanted, and being really sensitive to what parents wanted was important, because there was a proliferation of services. But the staffing was not as difficult, because we had a wider range of people that we could employ in an early childhood setting at that time.
Okay.
We moved from a lower level of people with a teaching qualification,
Yes,
and having a sort of a mix of qualifications, people with health and nursing backgrounds to work with our infants and toddlers. So there was this wide range of people you could attract into early childhood, people who'd worked in what we call the play centre part of, which is a parent-led part of early childhood.
yes.
So they'd worked in play centre, done a few low-level qualifications, had their own children there. Their children went off to school, then they brought their children, then they came and worked in early childhood. So I guess we were pulling from a wider pool of people. So that's the staffing shortage one. Now we're pulling from a very narrow pool, which is they must have a teaching qualification. So I think that's where the problems started, and we just weren't training enough teachers. That's the reality of it. We weren't attracting enough people into teacher training.
So I wonder if they will loosen the regulations, because they have to. I mean, here in the States, we are advocating for, across the states, a looser set of regulations and easier background checks, because it's gotten to the point where regulations are so much in the face of providing quality. Like, you can have a beautiful, high quality program and not necessarily have to have all degree teachers. The quality is driven by the culture and the leadership of the school, and the curriculum and the way that the classrooms are run, more so than making sure everybody has to have a master's degree. I just feel like a lot of this regulation is getting in the way of, in a way, it's getting in the way of quality, and it's getting in the way of serving families. So I'll be interested to see if New Zealand does pull back a little bit.
Well, I think early childhood and education in general in New Zealand is quite political, so it sort of depends on the government of the day.
Right.
So probably at the moment we have a government that's leaning towards a more regulated early childhood sector. So they've taken steps for the first time ever to introduce something called network management, which means that centrally government will determine where new early childhood services can be established. So that's the first time we've ever had that. Previous governments have loosened qualification requirements around allowing people with a primary school teaching qualification to be considered to be qualified in early childhood. And when they did that in 2008, that immediately fixed the teaching shortage that we had then, because at that time we had a surplus of primary school teachers, and it made sense to bring them into early childhood. Now, interestingly enough, we're still allowed to do that. It's never changed, even though we've had a change of government. But it's one of those. It's an interesting one. If anything, you kind of hear more murmurings about pushing for higher qualifications, but I think the handbrake is on at the moment around that, because you can't regulate something that you haven't got supply for.
That's right.
They have to solve the supply issue before they can push ahead with their higher qualification requirements. And at the moment, we're just probably treading water on it and going backwards a bit, but not hearing any real solutions. But it is work that, as the council here, is constantly working on, and ensuring that the right policy levers are being pulled down here in Wellington.
Yeah. So let me ask you about because I know that, New Zealand childcare, the standard of care and the quality of the education that goes on is extremely high, probably the highest in the world. So are the programs leading in innovation with regard to technology, with regard to outdoor classroom and nature-based play? Like, what are some of the things that are really kind of pillars of how New Zealand does it? Are there things that stand out either in their curriculum or beliefs, things like that really stand above?
I think we have been world leaders from way down here,
Yeah.
and our curriculum has been is world class, and I think it's been the fact that the environment that we have is such that it allows services to innovate. It allows them to be dynamic and vibrant. An owner can come in, or a community can establish an early childhood service, very diverse. You can go to something very structured. It's you could go to Reggio, you could go Montessori, you could go whatever you want, and all of these services are recognized and funded the same. So it's really up to the community.
Okay.
The funding follows the child in New Zealand. So the service gets funded if there are bums on seats. So if a parent chooses to bring their child to my service, then that service gets funded. So the services that are successful, they're the ones that get more funding.
Right.
And so I think that's created this where it's very much from the bottom up as far as what is provided. So if I want a sort of a high risk, nature based, out in the forest kind of a place for my child, I choose that. And of course there's standards and there's regulations around that. But you don't see a sort of homogenized sector. You see a very diverse sector. The state doesn't own any early childhood services in New Zealand. All it does is fund them.
Gotcha.
And it's from the bottom up that the services. And I think that's been probably our leading edge, because people come in with a real passion for whatever it is that they want to provide.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge at the moment is to get enough staff that have the same passion. So it's that selecting the right team who philosophically believe in the same things, when perhaps you're only faced with a couple of applicants, or maybe one applicant. I don't know. Do you know that term, the warm body policy?
Oh yes, we know that.
Have they got a pulse? Have they got a qualification?
Can they fog a mirror? Oh yes, then they're in. Come on in.
And so that's the challenge of making sure that you can keep true to your philosophy and what you believe in, and then of course you have a wonderful team and everything goes very well. To me it's the number one, that everybody's on the same page from a philosophical point of view. So I think it's probably been one of our big successes, is that the government hasn't discriminated on the basis, well, you're Montessori or you're Reggio or you want this or you want something else. If parents choose your service, we will fund the child as opposed to funding the service. The payment goes to the service, but they are funding the child. And
gotcha.
I like that model, and I think it's why we've got such a innovative and dynamic type of sector.
Yeah, because compared to the States is much more market driven and has to make sure that they're competitive compared to all the other programs, with pricing, with tuition, with what's offered for the tuition. And because, a vast majority of the United States is privately paid by parents. So it's obviously a completely different model.
It's the other way around here. So the bigger portion is paid by the government, and the smaller portion by parents. We have services that only receive government funding if they're in a poorer area and the families don't have any ability to pay. Then the service runs on the government funding,
right?
Only.
Yeah. So back to your story, Sue. So you were inspired to create these great programs and have early childhood be a huge part of your life. So who were your big inspirations?
Well, there's probably been a few people. Like all of us. I almost feel like I accidentally fell into early childhood because I was, a mother who wanted something quite special for my children. That's what it felt like at the time.
Although I will share that a lot of my clients and a lot of folks that I know in this industry started their schools for that very reason. So you might not be as unusual as you think. But anyway, keep going.
I've always had an interest in education. I think back probably to my primary school years, really. I had two particularly fabulous teachers. sort of around that age, 10, 11, 12, that kind of age. And they were just amazing teachers. Interestingly enough, they were both males. And we've got a real, we don't have any men in early childhood in New Zealand, or you count them on one hand just
Yes.
about. There's so few. And I think that's the saddest thing.
It is sad.
If I could have changed anything over my career and in my advocacy, if I could have just even got it from 1% to 5%, I would have been, probably somewhat happy with myself. But we've never been able to budge on that, which is a bit disappointing. But they were males, but they were those really fabulous teachers. They just stand out in my mind of someone who, they were really encouraging. They were the sort of people that identified the strengths of each child, particularly me. I used to get my lip down. I was the youngest of 3 girls, and I was a bit of a sook at times. And, they really encouraged me, taught me never to give up, I guess. And I think that was those lessons, when I think back, they stand out in my mind more than any other teacher I ever had. They were absolutely marvellous. They were fair and they were kind, they were encouraging, and they really knew every single child in that classroom. And, this was in the days when there were 40 children in every class. These days teachers are getting all upset about ratios and so forth, but there were 40 of us right from when I started school at age 5. When I got involved in the advocacy side of the Early Childhood Council, I had a particularly good mentor. And I think that, again, was another sort of one of those crystallizing moments in my life where I never would have thought I would have been on radio and TV and doing the work that I did. Gosh, I would have never dreamt of talking to you, any of those things, But this was someone who really, they believed in me and really, and gave me that sort of, I guess, the courage to do stuff that I wouldn't have imagined doing otherwise. They never let me off the hook. They were quite demanding, and if I couldn't answer their question quite precisely, they'd make me sort of go back until I could really fully understand. And there were times I would just be going like this. But they were a great teacher in that respect. And then, on the helping side of why, I help a lot of people. That's what I do. Tom tells me, we're driving around in the motorhome. He says, I have to turn the radio down all the time because you're taking another phone call. And you talk to that person for half an hour. He says, I know I did, but they needed help today.
Yeah.
I think that kind of comes from my parents, particularly my mother. She was, all for the underdog. She was always helping people who were, who were maybe fallen on hard times.
Yes.
And I think that being generous, and I consider myself to be someone who's very generous with my time. You're not sending a bill for everything. You never do. And just being generous and being a bit kind, helping people. And I also credit both my parents for the fact that I'm, a terribly practical person, very practical. I even have it in my byline as part of my my marketing, because I don't consider it's useful for me to do anything with people if I can't leave them with something practical to do. There's so much I'm going to say airy-fairy academic stuff floating around in the education sector, but sometimes people just want to know, how can they do something better? Can you give me some suggestions? Can you give me some ideas? And that's what they want. So my view is, when I do seminars, and that's what I love so much about coming to your conference, Chris, I came away with so many ideas that I could take as soon as I got back and put place just for my own little consultancy.
Yes, love that.
And that's what I like to give people. Sort of where I come from. I don't know if that answered the question or
yes,
not.
that's great. And you mentioned some, accomplishments, things that you've created, whether they're seminars or podcasts, or I don't know if you've written any books. And but what's an accomplishment from your career of which you're very proud or the most proud?
I guess, I kind of feel quite proud every day because, every day I help somebody. And I think that's sort of for me, that's the rewarding part about it. And that's what I don't need to get up and go to work anymore, to be honest. All my friends say, so why haven't you retired yet? And I go, well, Why would I? I love what I do.
Yeah.
I absolutely enjoy it with a passion.
Yeah.
Why would I give that up? And knowing that you're helping people, it's just the most rewarding thing that I can do.
Yeah.
So for me, it's sort of an everyday thing. And sometimes it's a tiny little quick email back to someone, and you know that's going to make a difference to that person's life. It take me 15 seconds to
That's
type
right.
and it's gone.
Yeah.
Or other days you've spent a whole day with someone and you've done something huge. So it's that. I guess on a bigger advocacy level, we had some. One of my proudest moments was achieving a turnaround in a government policy back in the 2000s when
Okay.
the government of the day at that time wanted to discriminate against privately owned services. So we'd always had this level playing field, and they wanted to bring in a funding model that discriminated on the basis of the ownership of the service that the child was attending. And we fought that one and won it. Nearly wore myself out over the time. But it was a big win because it was
That's
a
huge.
fundamental shift in how New Zealand would have funded services, that we would have seen this discrimination basically against a parent's choice, which I hold very dearly. To me, all power to parents.
Yes.
And so that one I fought long and hard, and won. And so that's I put that down as one of my big achievements. And no, look, I haven't written books. I haven't had time.
It sounds like it. Who would have time with all the helping and the advocacy and the work and everything you're doing? I mean, that's
other
fantastic.
people are writing marvelous books that I can read, but
there you go.
I think I like to talk.
Maybe I like to talk too, which is why my last 2 books are basically just transcriptions of this podcast. Like the easiest way to write a book is just get it all transcribed, edit it down, and put it into a book. So I kind of cheated, Sue. Don't tell anyone.
I've missed a trick there then, haven't I?
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been amazing. We are closing out on time, and it's been a joy to get to know you better. I can't wait to see you in just a few months in Wellington there. And so
with some good weather for you.
Yeah. So one of the questions,
winter, and I don't know if you've looked up what Wellington's like.
I have. I actually looked it up, and I know you guys are on Celsius, but Fahrenheit, it's not that bad because I'm used to Colorado weather, which is quite chilly. And so it's going to be in the mid 40s to low 50s when we're there, probably.
Yeah. So it's not so much the cold, but it's quite a windy place. So, bring something to tie that beautiful hair of yours back.
Oh, thank you.
A
hat. And so I was going to ask you what you're most looking forward to for the remainder of 2023. So, which is kind of related.
Clearly on a professional level, it is seeing you again, Chris. And I'm not just saying that because I'm on your podcast. We are absolutely, bubbling here with excitement about you coming. I'd like to be able to have the opportunity to let our people, our members, see you like this before you come, so that they've got a little taste of you. So something we could jack up, just even 10 minutes of you before you come. I think that would be wonderful. So that's a big highlight for me. To know you're going to come over here and hear your words of wisdom again firsthand. On a personal level, clearly this grandchild number 4 has to be on the list. How can it not be? That's so exciting. My knitting needles have been going flat stick. That's what I do for relaxation when we're driving along.
Yeah.
And just spending some more time with all of the grandchildren. Really, we love our motorhome and going camping and having holidays with them before they get to an age where they really, too big to come and doing their own thing. Enjoying these years where they really, really do love Nana and Opa. So fitting all of those things in.
That's so great. I love that. I can't wait to be a Nana and an Opa. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's the best job in the world, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, my kids are only 20 and 17, so we have a few more years.
You've got to wait. You've got to wait for quite a long time.
I'm going to wait a few more years, but
yeah, definitely.
But yesterday I was shopping in a Target shopping center here, and there was a Nana with her 2 young grandsons, and they were picking out toys, and he could pick out one toy. And he was like, which one should I pick? And so he got a Lego set. It was a Star Wars Lego set. But I just was like, I look forward to taking my grandkids, hopefully, and shopping and spoiling them, and I'm sure you do that, Sue.
Yeah.
A little bit.
But and you know what they love most though is just doing stuff with you at home.
Just being with you. Yeah.
Baking, love, just making some pikelets or some scones, My 4-year-old grandson arrives and he said, "What jobs have we got to do today, Nana?" As he comes in the door. Because is anything in the garden? Is there anything?
What a cutie.
They just want to be with you doing real stuff, really.
Yeah. That's so cute. Well, that is lovely. And I will close it out on that note. Thank you so much, Sue Kurtovich. You're a gem. And I've just loved this time with you. And I can't wait to be with you in person in just a few months in Wellington, New Zealand. Thank you for being here.
Chris. It's been a pleasure.
Wonderful. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. And we give big love and hugs to everyone in the industry around the world who listens and tunes in. And this is one of our first global episodes. So thanks again to Sue Kurtovich, and take care, everyone. God bless. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye. I hope you liked this episode of Childcare Rockstar Radio. If you did, please share it with someone you know and help spread the word to your friends in our industry and on social media. Childcare business success is my passion, and I'm honored to be on this journey with you. As a thank you for listening, learn more about how to grow your business and make more income with our brand new free quiz, the What's My Number One Income Killer quiz, exclusively for preschool and childcare owners. Take the quiz today at childcarequiz.com to discover what your number one income killer is and how to solve it. Take care and God bless.